It was 1959, a time of great change and fear in America. The country was recovering from World War II, dealing with the Cold War, and facing growing racial tensions. Amidst all this, a family vanished. Carol Jackson, his wife Mildred, and their 2 little daughters. They were an ordinary family, returning home to Apple Grove, Virginia, after visiting relatives. Their car was found abandoned by the side of the road, but there was no sign of them, anywhere. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. No signs of struggle, no blood, no clues at all. This made people worry even more. How could a whole family just disappear without a trace? The Jackson family had a baby girl, just 18 months old, and another daughter who was 5. The thought of these innocent children being in danger made the situation even more heartbreaking. Days turned into weeks, and the police searched everywhere, but they couldn't find a single hint of what happened to them. The whole community was on edge, wondering, what could have happened to this family? The Jacksons were known to be good, decent people. Carol was a quiet man who attended church regularly. He didn't smoke or drink. He met Mildred at church, where she was very active. They lived a simple life, taking their daughters to Sunday school, having no known problems with anyone. This made their disappearance even more puzzling. Why would someone want to harm such a nice family? This mystery caught the attention of people everywhere. The police hoped that by putting their story in the newspapers, someone would come forward with information. Maybe someone saw something unusual, or remembered seeing the family after their car was found. It was a desperate attempt to find any clue that could lead to solving this case. After some time, a couple came forward with a strange story. They remembered a scary incident that happened on the same day the Jacksons went missing. They were driving when an older blue car started flashing its lights, tried to force them off the road. A man got out of the car and walked towards them, but sensing danger, they quickly reversed and drove away. They got a good look at him. He was tall, with a thin face, heavy eyebrows, and long arms. He walked in an odd way, seemed threatening. They were sure he meant to harm them. This gave the police their first lead, but it still didn't explain where the Jacksons were or what had happened to them. It was just one more strange and disturbing story in a time already full of fear and uncertainty. The 1950s were a troubled time. The world was split between 2 great powers, the Western nations and the communist bloc. People were on edge because of the Cold War, the threat of nuclear war always looming. In the United States, society was changing rapidly. While many families tried to follow the ideal of a perfect, orderly life, the youth culture was rebelling. There was a growing sense of anger and disillusionment. This period saw a rise in disturbing events, with multiple murders becoming more frequent. People were afraid. They would read in the newspapers or see on television about killers like Ed Gein, who was arrested in 1957 for gruesome crimes in Wisconsin. He had killed women, stolen bodies from graves to make things out of their skin. It was like something out of a horror story, but it was real. Another case that shocked people was Harvey Glattman in Los Angeles. He lured women by pretending to be a photographer. He would tie them up, take photos, as they realized the danger they were in. Then, he would kill them. He got away with it for a while, before one of his victims managed to escape and call the police. These were just a few of the horrific crimes happening in that era. People were scared of the random violence. It felt like the world was becoming more dangerous, and anyone could be a target. This fear was the backdrop to the Jackson family's disappearance. Their case was not just another crime. It was a symbol of the dark, unsettling times. The sense of unease wasn't just about individual cases. The entire country was struggling with larger issues. There were tensions over civil rights, and a growing divide between generations. The old ways of living and thinking were being challenged, and not everyone was happy about it. The world felt like it was on the brink of something, but no one knew what that something was. As the search for the Jacksons continued, it became clear that they were likely victims of this new, darker world. Their disappearance wasn't just a mystery, it was a reflection of the times, an era where the rules seemed to be changing, and not for the better. It was as if the world was losing its sense of safety and order, and people were starting to fear what might come next. The world was full of tension and fear during this time. The Cold War made people anxious about the future, and society was changing in ways that made many uncomfortable. In the United States, there was a divide between those who wanted to return to a simpler, more innocent way of life, and those who were rebelling against it. This period was marked by an increase in violence and disturbing crimes. People began to feel that nowhere was safe anymore. Then, 2 months after the Jacksons disappeared, a grim discovery was made. 2 men, driving near Fredericksburg, Virginia, found their car stuck in the mud on a back road. As they searched for branches to help free the car, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight: a man's body, decomposing in a ditch, with his hands tied in front of him. It was clear he had been there for some time, but the cold winter had helped preserve the body. As they carefully removed him from the ditch, they made an even more shocking discovery beneath him: a small baby, who had been thrown in first and had suffocated under her father's body. The police identified the victims as Carol Jackson and his 18-month-old daughter, Janet. This was a cruel and brutal act that shocked everyone. The police believed the killer had forced the Jacksons' car off the road, much like what had almost happened to the couple who had escaped earlier. Now the search was on for Mildred and their other daughter, Susan. The police combed through the woods near where Carol and Janet were found, but there was no sign of them. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. But then, 2 weeks later, 2 boys out hunting in the woods came across a freshly dug area. Their curiosity led them to dig a little deeper, and they found blonde hair buried in the dirt. They had stumbled upon a shallow grave, and inside were the bodies of Mildred and Susan. This was more than just a crime. It was an act of unimaginable cruelty. The pathologist found that both Mildred and Susan had suffered greatly. Mildred endured horrific treatment before she was killed, forced into degrading acts, and then violently struck. It was unclear whether she succumbed to the blows or from other causes. Susan, just a little girl, was also subjected to a terrible fate. The horror of these acts shook the community to its core. The police continued to search for clues. They found a cinder-block building nearby that seemed to be connected to the crime. Inside, they uncovered disturbing materials and photographs. There were also fresh tire marks outside, suggesting the killer might have brought the Jacksons here before burying them. It was a place of darkness, offering some insight into the kind of person they were dealing with, someone familiar with the area and possessing a deeply troubling nature. But even with this grim discovery, they still had no idea who the killer was. It was a frustrating and frightening case, and the media began to pick up on the story, demanding answers. Who could have done something so terrible? And why? The investigation grew more desperate as the days passed. Then, in a surprising twist, the police received an anonymous letter that would change the course of the case. The letter was from a man named Glenn Moser, who had suspicions about a friend of his. This friend was Melvin Rees, a 26-year-old jazz musician and self-styled philosopher. Moser described Rees as a dark-haired man who was intelligent, talented, and often traveled from place to place to play his music. What made Rees stand out was his disturbing outlook on life. He was known for having deep conversations about life and death, and he often spoke about murder in a casual way. Moser remembered one conversation where Rees said You can't say it's wrong to kill. Only individual standards make it right or wrong. It was a chilling thing to say, especially now that it was being connected to the Jacksons' disappearance. Rees was fascinated by intense experiences, craving everything from love to the thrill of death. It wasn't just idle talk. He had once been arrested for trying to force a woman into his car, but the charges were dropped because the victim refused to press charges. This kind of behavior, combined with his strange ideas about life and morality, made Moser suspicious. Moser's letter led the police to take a closer look at Rees. He had attended the University of Maryland, but had dropped out before finishing his degree. He seemed to live a life free of rules, moving from place to place, playing music. As they dug deeper, they found that Rees had dated a woman named Wanda Tipton from the University of Maryland, who had been questioned when another woman, Margaret Harold, was killed in 1957. This raised even more red flags. In 1957, Margaret Harold was found dead in her car. She had been shot in the face, at point-blank range, and her killer had sexually assaulted her body afterward. Her boyfriend, an Army sergeant, had managed to escape, and gave the police a description of the killer: a tall, dark-haired man with an ordinary appearance, but a cold, brutal demeanor. The police had also found a cinder-block building near the crime scene, similar to the one they found near the Jacksons' bodies, filled with violent pornography and photos of dead women. This was the same building where they found the yearbook photo of Wanda Tipton. When the police questioned Tipton, she claimed not to know anyone matching the description of the killer. However, later, she admitted to knowing Rees, but had ended their relationship. This connection between Rees and the murders was becoming too significant to ignore. Despite these leads, Rees seemed to have vanished. The police couldn't find him, and he had left no forwarding address. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air, much like the Jacksons had. The trail went cold, and the case stalled once again. It was a time of frustration and fear for everyone involved, as it seemed like they were dealing with a cunning and dangerous man who knew how to cover his tracks. The case took another bizarre turn when a famous psychic, Peter Hurkos, became involved. Hurkos had gained international fame for his supposed abilities to see into the past and future. He offered to help the police with the Jackson case, and although they were skeptical, they agreed to let him try. Hurkos gave an eerily accurate description of the killer, matching witness accounts. He also described details about the Jacksons' bodies that had not been made public, adding an unsettling layer to the investigation. Hurkos went further, claiming he could find the killer's location. He described a house and led the police to it. Surprisingly, it turned out to be the home of one of their primary suspects, a trash collector. Hurkos also said that the killer had only 31 teeth, missing one, which matched the autopsy report for Mildred Jackson. Despite Hurkos' insights, they needed hard evidence to find and convict the true killer. Meanwhile, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Moser, the man who initially tipped off the police about Rees, received a letter from him out of the blue. Rees wrote to let him know that he was now living in Hyattsville, Arkansas, working as a piano salesman. Moser saw this as an opportunity to give the police a direct lead. He went straight to the police department with the letter, showing them where Rees was and providing everything he knew to help capture him. With this information, the FBI got involved since Rees had crossed state lines. They arrested him at the music store where he worked. The Army sergeant from the 1957 case in Annapolis was brought in for a lineup, and he identified Rees as the man who had approached and killed Margaret Harold. It was a crucial identification that linked Rees directly to the earlier crime. The agents then searched Rees's home for evidence. They were not expecting to find much after all this time, but what they did find was shocking. Inside a saxophone case, they discovered a .38 caliber handgun, the same type used in the Jacksons' murders. even more damning, was the stack of notes they found in his possession. These notes detailed several sexually sadistic acts, and one of them described killing a man and a baby on a lonely road. The note was attached to a piece of newspaper, showing a photo of Mildred Jackson, which was as close to a confession as they could get. Rees had written about how he had made the mother and daughter all mine, describing his twisted sense of control and power. His notes showed no remorse, only a cold and detached recounting of his actions. In another part of his writings, he described torturing Mildred, drawing out her death in a slow and painful manner. It was a horrifying glimpse into the mind of a man who viewed others as mere objects for his own pleasure. With the gun, the notes, and the witness identification, the case against Rees was strong. The police had finally caught the man responsible for the Jackson family's brutal murders, and possibly others. His arrest marked the end of a terrifying chapter, but it also left many questions about what drives a person to such dark places. Rees went to trial first for the murder of Margaret Harold. The evidence was solid, and he was convicted, receiving a life sentence. He was then sent to Spotsylvania County, Virginia, to stand trial for the murders of the Jackson family. During this trial, his own words sealed his fate. His detailed descriptions of the murders, and the sadistic pleasure he took in them, were enough to convince the jury to sentence him to death. But the story didn't end there. Rees's case went through a series of appeals. His death sentence was eventually commuted to life imprisonment in 1972, when the U.S. Supreme Court suspended all death sentences to review the constitutionality of the death penalty. Rees later confessed to killing 2 of the 4 unsolved murders he was suspected of, adding to the darkness surrounding his already horrific legacy. Rees died in prison in 1995 from heart failure, leaving behind a trail of horror and unanswered questions. He was suspected in a total of 9 murders, but the true extent of his crimes may never be known. His case remains a chilling example of how a seemingly ordinary person can hide the darkest of secrets. The legacy of Melvin Rees and the Jackson family murders remains a haunting chapter in American history. It serves as a reminder of the fragile line between normalcy and horror, and how quickly that line can be crossed. The world of the 1950s was already full of fear and uncertainty, and cases like this one only deepened the sense of unease that permeated the era. The Jacksons, who were just an ordinary family, became an unwilling symbol of a time when the world seemed to be losing its grip on safety and morality. In the end, the story of the Jackson family and Melvin Rees is not just about a crime, it's about the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life, waiting to emerge in the most terrifying ways. It's a sobering reminder that evil can take many forms, and sometimes it's hidden in plain sight.